From mysterious crystal sunstones to hidden star maps, the Vikings' navigation skills went far beyond what we imagined. Their advanced methods might have led them to one of history's greatest mysteries, the lost civilization of Atlantis. The Vikings were masters at reading the stars, using a method that was both simple and smart. They used a special technique called the night sun, where they tracked the position of the North Star and other bright stars to figure out their location at sea. Think of it like having a natural GPS system in the sky. They would hold up their hand to measure the height of the North Star above the horizon. The higher the star appeared, the further north they had sailed. The Vikings also created mental maps of star patterns, noting how certain stars lined up with their destinations. They passed these navigation secrets down through generations of sailors, teaching young Vikings how to use the stars as their guide across the dark waters. This knowledge helped them sail accurately even on cloudy nights when they couldn't see the sun. The Vikings had a remarkable tool that seems almost magical, the Sunstone. This crystal, likely made of Iceland's spar, helped them find the sun's position even when clouds filled the sky. When held up to light, these stones would split the sunbeams into two beams. By rotating the crystal until these beams matched in brightness, sailors could figure out exactly where the hidden sun was. It worked like a natural compass, helping Vikings stay on course even in bad weather. Recent experiments have shown these stones were surprisingly accurate, and researchers found traces of similar crystals in shipwrecks. The Sunstone wasn't just a fancy rock. It was a crucial tool that gave Viking ships an edge over other sailors, letting them venture further than anyone else dared to go. The Vikings created their own unique star maps that were different from what other sailors used at the time. They gave special names to star patterns, like calling the Big Dipper Thor's wagon and using it to find their way across the seas. These Norse star maps weren't drawn on paper. They were memorized stories and songs that described the positions of stars. Each constellation had a meaning tied to their gods and myths, making them easier to remember. They noticed that some stars made shapes like ships, hammers, and animals. The Vikings also tracked how stars moved in circles around the North Star throughout the night. They used these patterns to figure out both their location and the time, even in the middle of the ocean. This mix of storytelling and astronomy shows just how clever Viking sailors were at finding their way across vast distances. Some fascinating connections exist between Viking stories and the legend of Atlantis. In Norse tales, they spoke of a grand island kingdom called Hålogaland, remarkably similar to Plato's description of Atlantis. Both lands were said to be wealthy, advanced, and eventually swallowed by the sea. The Vikings told stories about a powerful northern realm with great ships and skilled sailors, matching how Plato described Atlantis as a naval power. Their sagas mention a place called Thule, the most northern of all lands, which some scholars think might be the same place Plato was talking about when he described Atlantis. The timing fits too. The Viking stories about these lost lands date back to around when Plato said Atlantis disappeared. They even described similar buildings and customs like grand halls and advanced farming methods. Recent underwater discoveries have revealed amazing Viking navigation tools that changed how we view their sailing abilities. Divers found wooden discs with special markings that might have been early compass devices buried in the mud of ancient harbors. These finds include bronze dials with strange symbols, possibly used to track the sun's position, and fragments of crystal sunstones still attached to wooden holders. We've also found maps carved into pieces of driftwood showing detailed coastal routes, and even a wooden case that might have held navigation tools, complete with runes describing how to use them. These discoveries suggest the Vikings had a complete navigation kit, letting them sail accurately across vast distances. What's really exciting is that some of these tools were found far from known Viking routes, hinting that they traveled to places we never knew about. The artifacts are so well preserved that scientists can actually test how they worked, proving the Vikings were much better sailors than we thought. Let's explore an amazing discovery that connects the Vikings to the Azores Islands. These islands, sitting in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, have some surprising Viking links. Scientists found stone structures on the islands that match Viking building styles, and they're lined up perfectly with certain stars that Vikings used for navigation. These structures point directly at the North Star and other key stars that Norse sailors relied on. Researchers also found traces of Norse-style farming methods and tools dating back to around 900 AD, way before Portuguese sailors officially discovered the islands. The really cool part is that some local Azorian stories talk about tall, fair-haired visitors who came from the north long ago. These findings suggest that Viking ships might have reached much further south than we previously thought. Let's explore how Viking art holds hidden clues about their amazing knowledge of the stars. When you look closely at their ship carvings, you'll spot tiny dots and lines that match real star patterns in the sky. On many rune stones, Vikings carved images of ships with special symbols above them. These weren't just decorative, they were actually showing important star positions used for navigation. Some carvings show the sun's path across the sky, with marks that helped sailors track seasonal changes. The famous Gotland picture stones are particularly interesting, featuring ships under arcs of dots that match real star constellations. Vikings even carved navigation instructions into their art, using symbols that showed sailors which stars to follow on specific routes. In their wooden chests and metal works, we find spiral patterns that copy the movement of stars around the North Star. Let's dive into one of the most exciting recent Viking discoveries: ancient parchments that might show routes to legendary places. These star charts, found hidden in a Norwegian church's walls, show sailing paths marked by star positions we've never seen before. The charts have unusual symbols marking a route far into the Atlantic, with detailed notes about using the stars to reach a large island. What's fascinating is how these paths line up with Plato's descriptions of Atlantis's location. The parchments show Vikings tracking specific star patterns that would guide ships to what they called the Western Isle of Riches. These charts also include notes about ocean currents and seasonal winds, proving Vikings understood complex navigation. Modern scientists testing these routes found they actually lead to several underwater formations that could be ancient settlements. The Vikings used clever math tricks to find their way at sea, and it was simpler than you might think. They measured time using a system of day marks, 8 equal divisions of the day based on the sun's position. By combining these time measurements with the height of stars, they could figure out how far north or south they'd sailed. They used their fingers as measuring tools, holding them at arm's length to gauge star positions. The width of a thumb at arm's length equals about 2 degrees in the sky, and they used this to measure the height of the North Star. This measurement told them their latitude, pretty much the same way modern sailors do it. The really smart part was how they combined different measurements to double-check their position. They'd match the sun's height at noon with star positions at night, making their navigation more accurate. Let's look at how modern science is proving the Vikings were right all along. Scientists recently tested Viking navigation methods using exact copies of their tools. They found that sunstones can locate the sun's position with amazing accuracy, within 1 degree, even on cloudy days. A team of researchers sailed across the North Atlantic using only Viking methods, successfully reaching their target within a few miles. They used crystal sunstones, checked star positions, and followed the flight patterns of birds, just like the Vikings did. The team discovered that combining these methods actually works better than using just one tool. They also found that Viking position measurements using hand-width calculations were surprisingly accurate when compared to modern GPS readings. These experiments show that Viking sailors were much more advanced than we once thought. Thanks for joining us on this journey through Viking navigation secrets. There's still so much to discover about these amazing seafarers. If you enjoyed learning about Norse exploration, hit like, subscribe, and share with your history-loving friends.